November 1944. Herkenforest, Germany. The air tastes like iron and wet earth. A young rifleman, 22 years old, maybe younger, crouches behind the shattered trunk of what used to be a pine tree. His breath comes in short, visible clouds. The forest around him is no longer a forest. It's a graveyard of splintered wood and frozen mud, where every shadow could be death, and every sound makes your heart stop. He's holding a pistol. Not the gun he wanted, not the weapon they promised him in training. Just this, a piece of stamped metal and polymer that weighs almost nothing in his shaking hands. It feels cheap. It looks cheaper. The grip is checkered but worn smooth by 1,000 hands before his. There's a scratch along the slide that nobody bothered to fix, because nobody expected this gun to matter. Somewhere ahead, through the smoke and the skeletal trees, German voices echo. They're close. Too close. His rifle is gone, lost in the same firefight that scattered his unit and left him alone in this frozen hellscape. All he has now is this sidearm that everyone back at base called the backup gun. The one you never actually need. The one that sits on your hip while the real fighting happens with something bigger, something better. But right now, in this moment, it's all he has. His finger rests on the trigger guard, not inside it, just like they taught him. His hands are so cold he can barely feel them. His ears are ringing from the artillery that hasn't stopped for 3 days. He can smell cordite and pine sap, and something worse that he's trying not to think about. A shape moves 30 yards ahead, then another. His heart hammers so hard he thinks they'll hear it. He raises the pistol. The front sight blade trembles in his vision. The metal is cold against his cheek. His breath fogs the air between him and whatever's coming through the trees. 20 yards. He thumbs the safety off. The click sounds impossibly loud in his head, though he knows they can't hear it over the distant rumble of tanks and the crack of rifles somewhere to the south. 15 yards. The shape resolves into a man. Feldgrau uniform. Helmet low. Rifle. At the ready. Sweeping left and right through the shattered forest. 10 yards. The German soldier doesn't see him yet, doesn't know that behind this burned tree trunk, a terrified American is aiming a pistol he's never fully trusted, trying to remember everything they taught him about breathing and sight picture and not jerking the trigger. The German's head turns. Their eyes meet. Time doesn't slow down the way they say it does. It just stops. One frozen second where two men who've never met and whose mothers probably prayed the same prayers lock eyes across a muddy clearing in a forest that shouldn't even exist anymore. The rifleman pulls the trigger. The gun bucks in his hand, sharp, clean, without hesitation. The sound is swallowed by the forest. The German drops. But there's another behind him. The pistol cracks again, and again. Each shot a decision. Each decision a heartbeat. The slide snaps back and forward, brass casing spinning into the frozen mud, smoke curling from the barrel in the cold air. He counts his shots without thinking. 3, 4, 5. Another figure appears. He fires. 6. The pistol doesn't jam, doesn't hesitate, doesn't fail him when his hands are numb and his mind is screaming and everything around him is chaos. 7. The forest goes quiet. He's still alive. The pistol is still in his hand. Slide locked back. Chamber empty. Smoke rising from the barrel like a ghost. His hands are shaking so badly now that he almost drops it while reloading. The empty magazine hits the ground. A fresh one slides home with a metallic click that sounds like a promise. The slide releases. A new round chambers. He doesn't know it yet. Can't know it yet. But this moment will be repeated 10,000 times in 100 different forests, jungles, deserts, and cities over the next 80 years. Different hands. Different enemies. Different wars. But the same gun. And the same question that will define its legacy. When everything else fails, what do you trust with your life? 1942. Somewhere in America, a factory you've never heard of is about to change history. Not with innovation, Not with genius. Not with the kind of dramatic breakthrough that makes headlines or wins awards. With arithmetic. A room full of men in shirt sleeves and loosened ties are staring at spreadsheets that tell a brutal truth. America is about to fight a war on two fronts, across two oceans, with more soldiers than it has weapons to arm them. The math is simple and terrifying. They need pistols. Hundreds of thousands of them. Maybe millions. And they need them now. The traditional answer? The gun they've been making for decades? The one with the polished steel and the 7 careful pounds of American craftsmanship? Costs too much and takes too long. Each one requires machining, fitting, hand finishing. Each one is built like it's supposed to last forever. But forever is a luxury they don't have. So they make a decision that will accidentally define a century. Build it cheap, build it fast, and build it to barely survive the war. The specifications are brutal in their simplicity. No fancy machining. No hand-fitted parts. No polished steel or walnut grips. Use stamping where you can. Use polymer where it won't matter. Cut every corner that doesn't affect whether it goes bang when you pull the trigger. The cost target is insane. Roughly a quarter of what the old pistol costs. Some engineers think it's impossible. Others think it's insulting. Turning a weapon into a commodity. Stripping away everything that made it feel like a weapon, and leaving behind something that feels more like a tool you'd find in a hardware store. But there's a war on. And war doesn't care about feelings. The first prototypes roll off the line looking exactly like what they are. Cheap. The finish is rough. The lines are utilitarian. The grip feels wrong in the hand. Too light, too plastic, too disposable. Soldiers who test it compare it unfavorably to everything that came before. Officers look at it with barely concealed disdain. But here's what nobody talks about in those early reports. It works. Drop it in mud, still fires. Freeze it overnight, still fires. Skip maintenance for 3 months because you're too busy trying not to die, still fires. The factory doesn't know this yet. They're just trying to meet quotas. Assembly lines run triple shifts. Workers, many of them women, because the men are overseas, stamp metal, mold grips, test fire rounds into barrels filled with sawdust. Each pistol takes a fraction of the time the old ones did. Each one costs less than a week's wages. They produce them by the thousands, then tens of thousands, then hundreds of thousands. They're packed in crates and shipped to bases where quartermasters issue them with the same enthusiasm you'd have for handing out shovels. They're backup weapons. Secondary arms. The thing you carry because regulations say you have to carry something on your hip. Nobody expects them to matter. Nobody expects them to last beyond 1945. And absolutely nobody, not the engineers, not the factory workers, not the generals signing the contracts, suspects that 80 years later, this cheap, disposable, barely acceptable pistol will still be in service while almost everything else from that era is rusting in museums. But that's exactly what's about to happen, because the men making these decisions are thinking about cost per unit. They're thinking about production capacity. They're thinking about winning a war. They're not thinking about what happens when something built to be disposable turns out to be indestructible. 1943. Training camps across America. Thousands of men handling the new pistol for the first time. The complaints start immediately. It's too light. Feels like a toy. What happened to the real guns? Soldiers compare it to the pistol their fathers might have carried in the First War, solid, heavy, commanding respect just by existing. This new thing? It's an insult. It's what you give someone when you've run out of the good stuff. Instructors try to be diplomatic, but even they can't hide their disappointment. They teach the manual of arms with the kind of resigned professionalism you use when explaining something you don't personally believe in. This is your sidearm. You will maintain it. you will qualify with it. And yes, it's made partly out of plastic. No, we don't know why either. The mockery has a name in some units, the disposable, as in, use it once and throw it away. As in, don't get attached because it won't last. Officers are even less impressed. To them, a pistol is more than a weapon. It's a symbol. It's part of the uniform, part of the identity. Wearing a cheap stamped piece of polymer feels like showing up to a formal dinner in work boots. It's functional, sure, but it's not right. Some units try to source the old pistols through unofficial channels. Others just accept that this is what they've been given and hope they never actually need to use it. But then the shooting starts, and something unexpected happens. The gun that nobody wanted becomes the gun that never lets them down. It doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments scattered across a dozen theaters of war. A pilot whose plane goes down in the Pacific uses his pistol to signal rescuers and defend himself from wild animals for 3 days. The gun fires every time despite being soaked in salt water. A paratrooper lands in a French hedgerow, loses his rifle in the jump, and spends 12 hours behind enemy lines with only his sidearm. It fires 40 rounds without a single malfunction, despite being packed with mud. The reports trickle back. Unofficial at first, soldiers writing letters home, squad leaders noting it in after-action reviews. Then more formal. Field testing shows reliability rates that shouldn't be possible for something this cheap. The doubt doesn't disappear overnight. Trust isn't built by statistics. It's built by repetition, by the slow accumulation of moments where the thing you thought would fail doesn't. By mid-1944, the complaints quiet down, not because anyone has changed their mind about how the gun looks or feels, but because they've learned something more important: it doesn't quit. And when you're cold, tired, scared, and far from home, doesn't quit matters more than looks impressive. The gun nobody wanted becomes the gun everybody keeps. The validation doesn't happen in a lab. It happens in places where nothing works and everything matters. Normandy beaches, where seawater and sand destroy equipment within hours. The gunfires. Italian mountains, where freezing rain turns rifles into clubs and automatic weapons into paperweights. The gunfires. Philippine jungles, where humidity rusts steel overnight and moisture seeps into every seal and crevice. The gunfires. It's not dramatic. There are no ceremony. It's not dramatic. There are no ceremonies. No medals awarded to a piece of equipment. The gun's reputation is built in silence, in the absence of failure, when failure means death. A Marine sergeant in Iwo Jima keeps one on his hip through 36 days of volcanic ash that infiltrates every piece of gear, turning machinery into grinding, useless weight. He fires it on day 1. He fires it on day 36. Same gun. Same reliability. He writes home, everything else stopped working. This thing won't quit. A tanker in the Battle of the Bulge crawls out of his burning Sherman with nothing but his sidearm. The metal is so cold it burns his hand. He's been in sub-zero weather for 18 hours. His fingers are numb. The gun has frost in the crevices of the slide. He chambers around anyway, expecting it to jam, expecting the cold to have seized something vital. It fires. It keeps firing. Later, he'll swear it saved his life, but he'll never be able to explain why he trusted it when everything else that day had betrayed him. This is how legends are actually born, not in press releases or promotional materials, but in the accumulated weight of 10,000 moments where someone expected failure and got function instead. The proof spreads through the ranks like folklore. Veterans tell new replacements, "Don't worry about the pistol. It's ugly, but it works." Commanders stop requesting the old models. Armorers stop hearing complaints. The gun becomes invisible in the best possible way. It fades into the background because nobody has to think about it anymore. And then the war ends. Everyone assumes that's the end of the story. The factories stop production. The assembly lines go quiet. The gun was built for one purpose, and that purpose has been fulfilled. Warehouses fill with surplus. Military planners begin the process of transitioning to peacetime arms. But something strange happens. The guns don't disappear. 1950. Korea. A new war in a new decade, and the faces have changed, but the gun hasn't. It's still there. Same design, same cheap construction, same weapon that was supposed to be temporary. American soldiers carry it up frozen mountains and through rice paddies. It performs exactly as it did 5 years earlier, which is to say, without complaint, without drama, without failure. 1960s. Vietnam. The jungles are different, wetter, hotter, more hostile to machinery than anywhere the gun has been before. Humidity that turns other weapons into rust sculptures within weeks. The gun endures. Marines hump it through the Mekong Delta. Green Berets carry it on long-range patrols where resupply is impossible and every ounce matters. It fires when they need it to. That's all. That's enough. 1970s. The Cold War. New technologies emerge. Polymer frame wonder guns with double-stack magazines and modern ergonomics. Military trials test dozens of designs meant to replace the old workhorse. Some are better on paper. Some have higher capacities. Some feel better in the hand. But somehow, the old gun remains. Not because it's the best at any one thing, it isn't, but because it's good enough at everything that matters, and good enough across 40 years is rarer than excellent for 40 minutes. 1980s. The gun appears in photographs from Beirut, Grenada, Panama. Different conflicts. Different justifications. Same weapon. By now it's outlasted the generals who approved its production. It's outlasted the factories that built it. Some of the guns in service are literally older than the soldiers carrying them, issued to their fathers or uncles decades earlier, returned to armories, reissued again and again. 1990s. The Gulf War. Desert sand, the ultimate test for mechanical systems. The gun passes. It always passes. Special operations units, who can request almost any weapon they want, still carry it. Not as their primary. Combat has evolved beyond pistol range for most engagements, but as the backup. The last resort, the thing you want when everything else has gone wrong. 2000s. Iraq. Afghanistan. 2 decades of continuous deployment. The gun is now 60 years old. Not individual pistols necessarily, though some are, but the design. The fundamental DNA of this cheap disposable weapon that refuses to become obsolete. Soldiers in Fallujah carry it. Marines in Helmand Province carry it. Contractors, local forces, allies, they all carry versions of the same basic design. Meanwhile, the empires that define the 20th century crumble and reshape themselves. The Soviet Union collapses. The Berlin Wall falls. The European colonial system dissolves completely. Superpowers rise and stumble. Entire political philosophies are discredited and abandoned. And through all of it, through every shift in doctrine, every revolution in military technology, every generational change in how wars are fought, the gun remains. Not because anyone is particularly attached to it, not because it's the best option, but because removing it would require answering a question nobody wants to answer. Replace it with what? Every alternative has advantages. Every alternative also has disadvantages. New logistical chains, new training requirements, new costs, new risks. The old gun has none of these problems because it's already everywhere, already familiar, already proven across more wars than any other sidearm in history. So it stays. Not through intention, but through inertia. Not through superiority, but through ubiquity. The gun that was built to barely survive one war survives them all. 2010s. A conference room in the Pentagon. The discussion is about modernization. On one side, procurement officers with presentations showing newer designs, better ergonomics, higher capacity, modular rails, improved sights, all the features that modern shooters expect. and that the old gun lacks. On the other side, logistics officers with spreadsheets showing what replacement would actually cost. Not just the purchase price of new weapons, but the replacement of holsters, magazines, training materials, armorer tools, qualification courses. The true cost of change measured in billions of dollars and years of transition. And in the middle, soldiers who've actually carried the old gun in combat, shrugging and saying, "It works. Why fix it?" This same conversation has happened dozens of times over dozens of years. The conclusion is always the same. The gun stays. But it's not just institutional inertia. Something else is happening. Something harder to quantify, but impossible to ignore. The gun has become trusted. Trust is a strange thing in military equipment. It's not the same as effectiveness. You can have an effective weapon you don't trust. Something that works beautifully on the range, but that you doubt when your life depends on it. And you can have a trusted weapon that isn't particularly effective. Something that objectively has limitations, but that you know, bone deep, will not let you down. The old gun has become the latter. Soldiers trust it in a way they can't quite articulate. It's not sexy. It's not impressive. If you're showing off at the range, you'd rather have something else. But if you're walking into a situation where you might actually need to draw a pistol, which statistically is rare, but catastrophically important when it happens, you want the gun that 3 generations of soldiers have bet their lives on. Special operations units exemplify this weird loyalty. They have essentially unlimited equipment budgets and can request any weapon system in existence. Some do choose alternatives, but many keep the old gun as their secondary, even when they've modernized everything else. Why? Ask them, and you get variations of the same answer. Because I know it works. Not I think it works. Not it should work. I know. That knowledge is built on decades of institutional memory. Every special operations soldier has heard the stories from instructors who heard them from their instructors. Stories about frozen mountains, flooded rivers, week-long patrols, desperate situations where the gun fired when it had every reason not to. This oral tradition creates a feedback loop. The gun's reputation for reliability makes soldiers trust it more. That trust means they maintain it properly and use it confidently. That proper maintenance and confident use reinforces its reliability. Round and round, decade after decade. Meanwhile, civilian markets fall in love with the gun too. Police departments adopt it. Competitive shooters use it. Everyday carriers choose it. The design spreads beyond its military origins into broader American gun culture. Which means that even if the military decided to replace it, the gun wouldn't disappear. It would just migrate. There are millions in circulation. The design is proven. Parts are everywhere. Gunsmiths know how to work on it. It has achieved something rare, practical immortality. By the 2020s, the gun is approaching 80 years old. That's older than jet engines. Older than interstate highways. Older than most of the people carrying it. And it's still in service. Still firing. Still refusing every attempt to retire it. Because at some point, nobody can say exactly when, the gun crossed a threshold from equipment to institution. It stopped being a tool you could simply replace and became part of the fabric of military culture. Removing it wouldn't just require finding something better. It would require convincing 3 generations of soldiers that their trust was misplaced. Good luck with that. Today, right now, somewhere in the world, the gun is being fired. Not ceremonially. Not in a museum. Not in some commemorative video about the good old days. In actual use. By actual soldiers. Doing the actual work it was designed to do 8 decades ago. Think about that. The smartphone you're holding is probably less than 5 years old and will be obsolete in 2 more. The car you drive uses technology that didn't exist 20 years ago. The computer running your life would have seemed like science fiction to the people who designed this gun. But the gun itself? Fundamentally unchanged. Still the same basic design. Still the same operating principle. Still doing the same job. How? Not because it's perfect. It isn't. The trigger isn't as crisp as modern designs. The sights aren't as advanced. The ergonomics aren't as refined. The capacity isn't as high. But it has something that transcends those limitations. It has proven itself across every condition humanity has invented for destroying things. Arctic cold that turns steel brittle. Desert heat that melts plastics. Jungle humidity that rusts metal overnight. Ocean salt that corrodes everything. Urban combat that fills weapons with concrete dust. Mountain altitude that changes how mechanisms function. The gun has been through all of it. Not in controlled tests with engineer oversight, but in actual combat where the stakes are life and death. And it has passed every test the same way. Quietly, without fanfare, without excuses. This is the story that matters. Not the specifications. Not the innovations. Not the marketing or the mythology. Just the simple, brutal fact that when you pull the trigger, it goes bang. Every single time. That reliability has created something almost unprecedented in military history. A weapons system that has served continuously from World War II to the present day. Think about the span of human experience contained in that timeline. The soldiers who carried this gun in 1944 fought enemies using bolt-action rifles and horse cavalry. The soldiers carrying it today fight enemies using drones and cyber warfare. The gun bridges that entire gap. It's been carried by the greatest generation and by Gen Z. By soldiers who'd never seen television. And by soldiers who grew up with the internet. By troops who wrote letters home by candlelight. And by troops who live-streamed their downtime on TikTok. And to all of them, it's done the same job with the same uncomplaining competence. There's a deeper truth here. Something about human nature and what we actually value when the marketing fades and the hype cycles move on. We say we want innovation. We say we want the newest, the best, the most advanced. And maybe we do, in the abstract. But when our lives depend on something, when we need it to work not most of the time, but all the time, when failure isn't an inconvenience but a catastrophe, then we want something different. We want boring reliability. We want the thing that's been tested so thoroughly, for so long, by so many people, in so many situations, that its performance is no longer a question. It's a fact. The gun has become that thing. It's boring in the best possible way. There are no surprises, no exciting new features, no revolutionary changes, just decades of proof that it does exactly what it's supposed to do. And somehow, that boring reliability has made it immortal. The factories that built it are gone. The engineers who designed it are gone. The wars that justified its creation are history. Entire generations have been born, lived, and died since the first one rolled off an assembly line. But the gun? Still here. Still firing. Still refusing to become obsolete. Because the gun learned something that empires and corporations and technologies never seem to learn. Survival isn't about being the best. It's about being good enough, consistently, for long enough that everyone forgets you were ever supposed to be temporary. The gun was built cheap, built to die, built to be forgotten as soon as the war ended. Instead, it became the standard by which every other sidearm is measured. Not through superiority, through endurance. And endurance, it turns out, is its own kind of excellence. Somewhere right now, in an armory, on a range, in a holster on someone's hip, that same basic design is ready to fire again. Just like it was yesterday. Just like it will be tomorrow. The gun that was supposed to disappear became the gun that cannot be killed. That's not just a story about a weapon. That's a story about what actually lasts.